After graduation, I quietly moved my grandfather's inheritance, $3 million, into a trust fund, just in case. A week ago, my parents and sister showed up beaming with joy. "The house is in my name now," I said, "and you need to move out by Friday." Graduation day was supposed to feel like freedom. Everyone around me seemed lighter, almost glowing. Kids hugging parents, professors shaking hands, champagne bottles popping under the afternoon sun. I stood in that crowd wearing the same rented robe as everyone else, but something inside me felt heavy. Not sadness, just the weight of knowing that nothing would actually change. My parents didn't show up. My mother sent a text at 9:12 a.m. "We're proud of you, sweetheart. The plumber just came, so we can't make it. Take lots of pictures." I didn't reply. She never mentioned which plumber, or why every important moment in my life always seemed to collide with some urgent house issue. That house, my grandfather's old place, had become a black hole for money and excuses. Roof repairs, garden maintenance, unexpected tax bills. Every time I called home, there was a new financial emergency. The kind that somehow required my savings, my credit card, my patience. When my name was called and the dean handed me the diploma, I smiled for the photographer. Not for the moment, but because I finally understood what my grandfather had meant before he died. "Don't expect gratitude from people who live off guilt," he'd said once, his hand trembling around a cup of black coffee. "They'll never thank you. They'll just wonder what took you so long." After the ceremony, I skipped the after-party and went back to my dorm. My roommates were already halfway through a bottle of cheap vodka, laughing at old professors' photos. I nodded, congratulated them, and slipped into my room. On my desk, under a pile of old essays, sat an envelope I'd been avoiding for months. My grandfather's final correspondence. He'd sent it just 2 weeks before his heart gave out. Inside was a letter and a flash drive. The letter read, "Ethan, you are the executor of my estate. You'll be told it's a formality, that it means nothing. Don't believe that. The numbers won't lie. When you see them, act. Don't argue. Don't announce. Act." Back then, I didn't know what numbers he meant. My father had said the estate was modest. My mother said it was barely enough for maintenance. I wanted to believe them, because believing meant I could finish college without extra worries. But that night, curiosity beat loyalty. I plugged in the flash drive. It contained a series of spreadsheets, labeled by year. The earliest one dated back 20 years. The final one stopped 6 months before his death. At first, the columns made no sense. Account numbers, property codes, bank IDs. But once I matched the transaction totals, it hit me. There were millions. Not metaphorical millions. Real, tangible digits. $3,012,780 in total assets. My hands went cold. My family had always said Grandpa was comfortable, but not rich. So why did I see steady withdrawals over the last decade, each marked with vague descriptions, family assistance, renovation, temporary loan, and all authorized by my father? I opened the most recent folder. It showed a balance drop of over $500,000 between January and May. That was during my final semester, the same period when my parents had asked me to help out with tuition by taking another student loan because things were tight. Things were tight, all right. Because someone was bleeding the inheritance dry. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the muffled sound of laughter down the hall. Everyone else was celebrating a future. I was staring at the past, a ledger of quiet theft written in polite decimals. That's when something in me shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was something sharper, colder. I stopped thinking like a son and started thinking like a trustee. If they were stealing from the dead, what would stop them from stealing from me once the account was gone? Nothing, unless I learned to move faster than them. So I started copying. Every file, every email, every PDF. I made cloud backups, 2 flash drives, and a hidden folder on my phone. It took the whole night. When the sun rose, I looked at my reflection in the laptop screen. My eyes looked different. Not tired, not scared, just focused. That was the moment graduation actually meant something. Not the diploma, not the handshake, but the quiet realization that the next time my family reached for what was mine, they'd find nothing left to take. For the next week after graduation, I lived between 2 worlds, the one where I pretended to be a normal son, and the one where I tracked digital footprints like a private investigator. During the day, I answered my mother's cheerful calls about garden upgrades and new curtains for the guest room. At night, I dug through PDFs, archives, and scanned bank statements. I stopped watching movies. I stopped meeting friends. My world narrowed down to columns and decimals. Each file revealed something new. Transfers from the estate account to a construction company that didn't exist. Payments labeled as consultancy fees to an address that traced back to my father's golf buddy. Sometimes I'd pause, stare at the screen, and whisper, "You're really doing this, aren't you?" The money trail was both chaotic and clever. They'd learned just enough about paperwork to make everything look legitimate to an outsider. But to someone who understood Grandpa's meticulous habits, it was a vandalized painting. He'd kept perfect order, each property tagged, every cent logged with justification codes. My father's edits looked like graffiti on that order. Random withdrawals, incomplete notes, even signature mismatches. I compared them side by side and felt the same nausea as when you see someone write their name on a gravestone. The more I saw, the quieter I became. That was new for me. I'd spent years trying to get them to listen, to talk, to reason, to care. Now, silence became my ally. I learned to respond with calm neutrality, the way predators do before they strike. My mother noticed something. "You sound distant lately," she said one evening over the phone. "Everything okay, honey?" I lied easily. "Just tired from finals. Maybe you should come home for a bit. Your father misses you." I stared at the spreadsheet in front of me, another $8,000 labeled emergency plumbing, and replied, "Yeah, maybe soon." But soon never came. Instead, I started building what Ms. Keller later called the architecture of control. I didn't know her yet, but the blueprint was forming in my mind. If I confronted them, they'd cry. If I asked questions, they'd twist words. So confrontation was off the table. The solution had to be structural, something they couldn't argue with. A system stronger than emotions, sealed by law. I started visiting the bank branch where the estate was held. Small town branch, old carpet, receptionist who knew my parents by name. She smiled when she saw me. "Oh, you're Mr. Ward's son. How's college?" "Graduated," I said, keeping my tone polite. "I just wanted to confirm some details about my grandfather's account." "Routine check." She hesitated, then smiled again, a little too quickly. "Of course. Do you have your authorization letter?" That word, authorization, told me everything. She'd been instructed not to show me anything. Someone had changed access rights. Probably my father. I left the bank calm. I wasn't angry. I just understood what game I was in. They thought I was still a kid with sentimentality as armor. They didn't realize I'd already switched to rules and signatures. That night, I reread Grandpa's old emails. He had a strange way of teaching lessons through metaphors about machines. One message stood out. A machine that leaks oil doesn't stop because of the leak. It stops when you keep refilling it instead of finding the hole. He'd written that 3 years before his death, and I was the last drop of oil they were planning to pour. I decided to become the mechanic. The first step was documentation. I created an encrypted folder labeled Research on an external SSD. Every receipt, every altered signature, every timestamped withdrawal. I added a timeline, cross-referenced with family events. It was disturbing how often financial dips aligned with health issues, weddings, renovations, or unexpected crises. My sister's business loan had come directly from Grandpa's emergency fund. My father's tax penalty had been quietly reimbursed from the estate. It wasn't just mismanagement, it was theft camouflaged as care. I kept finding handwritten notes scanned into the files. Most were signed by my father in that hurried, half-legible script of his. One of them actually said, "We'll fix it later." No, I thought. You won't. Around the 5th night, my laptop started to overheat. I was staring at a document that summarized the remaining balance, $2,743,000. That number would haunt me. It wasn't just money, it was a countdown. I imagined it shrinking every month until nothing was left but excuses. So I wrote a message to myself in the Notes app. Don't stop until it's yours. Not revenge, correction. By the weekend, I had enough evidence to prove intent, misrepresentation, and possibly fraud. But I also knew going public would destroy everyone instantly. My mother, my father, even my sister. And despite everything, I didn't want that. Not yet. So I made a decision that night. If I couldn't restore the family, I'd restore the legacy. Quietly. Without permission. Without warning. I opened my grandfather's ledger again and whispered into the dark, "I'm fixing the leak." I found her the way you find the right mechanic when your engine knocks at odd hours, a quiet recommendation from someone who'd been burned before. The review thread was anonymous, the language clipped. Keller. Doesn't posture. Bills high. Wins quietly. That was enough. Her office sat half a level below street grade, wedged between a yoga studio and a shuttered tailor shop. Concrete steps, a steel railing, a door with frosted glass that let in light, but no clarity. I liked it instantly. It felt like a place where problems disappeared because paperwork made them irrelevant. Inside, the reception area was clean, undecorated. A single plant, a clock that didn't tick, and a desk where a man in his 50s looked like he'd been born answering phones. He took my name, then buzzed me through without pleasantries. Professionals don't oversell. Keller stood when I entered. Early 40s, neutral suit, hair pulled back. No, I'm with you, smile. She gestured to a chair, then tapped a legal pad with the end of her pen. Tell me what you can prove, she said. The phrasing told me she understood families. Not what happened, not how you feel. What you can prove. I placed the external SSD on her desk like a weapon. This is a copy, I said. Transactions, scans, emails, timelines. I'm the executor named in my grandfather's materials. Access was narrowed without my consent. Funds are leaving under vague pretexts to associates and shells. Balance is shrinking. She didn't nod. She didn't say wow. She plugged the drive in, clicked through folders with surgeon calm. You built this structure? She asked. Yes. Any originals? 2. Off-site, dated and hash-logged. I watched her glance up, just once, the smallest flicker of approval. She opened a PDF with my father's hurried signature. This is dirty, she said flatly. Not spectacular. Not cinematic. Just dirty. That's how they do it, I replied. Small leaks. Familiar faces. She drew a rectangle on her pad, labeling corners with neat capital letters. Authority, custody, control, notice. Then she drew a circle around the center. You win when you stand here, she said, tapping the circle. Right now, they've kept you at notice and away from custody. They file, you react. We reverse that. I didn't ask for inspirational language. I wanted steps. She gave them. Step 1, she said. You become undisputed managing fiduciary for whatever your grandfather clearly intended you to manage. If language in the testamentary documents is sloppy, we tighten the chain with a protective trust. Irrevocable, with you as trustee. Beneficiary definitions precise, conditions narrow, distribution rules boring and brutal. Boring is good. Step 2, we end discretion. No more maintenance, without formal requisition and dual sign-off. No cash. No handshakes. If they try to route around you, it triggers automatic review. If they lie, we don't scream. We file. Step 3, we quietly notify every institution that matters. Banks, registries, the county clerk, insurance carriers. Not an announcement. A correction of records. If anyone calls them later, the person on the other end sees your name first. That's custody. Step 4. She looked up, holding eye contact. You do not confront. You let the system talk. I sat back. Cost? I asked. Hi, she said without apology. Precision isn't cheap, but sloppiness costs more. She printed a short engagement letter and slid it to me with a pen. One more thing, she added. If you sign, you don't get to be the apologetic son. You'll be the one who files, certifies, and forces the clock to run on your terms. That means when they cry, you don't improvise. You point to the documents and keep your hands clean. I'm not here to cry, I said. I'm here to stop the leak. She nodded once. We signed. From there, the room transformed into a control tower. She called a notary who arrived in 11 minutes. She dictated a skeleton trust instrument in plain English first, no poetry. Titles, dates, authorities. Then she layered the legal muscle. Grantor language linked to the will. Trustee appointment explicit. Successor rules dead simple. Spendthrift clause ironclad. Amendment powers none. Revocation powers none. She wrote as if I didn't exist emotionally, which was perfect. Emotion is how families reroute logic. Name the trust, she said. Ward Legacy Protective Trust, I answered. Too sentimental, she said. Sentiment invites challenge. Use initials and a number. EU 31. Better. We scheduled 2 bank meetings under the benign heading of records correction. The receptionist printed letters of direction addressed to custodians, each one short enough to be read and scary enough to be obeyed. Language like supersedes any prior informal instructions and effective upon receipt. No theatrics, just gravity. Timeline, I asked. 3 weeks for the skeleton to be flesh, she said. Faster if nobody fights us early. Slowest part is people who think the world runs on favors. As we wrapped, she leaned back and studied me. You're unusually calm for someone discovering theft. It's easier than fighting ghosts, I said. Numbers don't lie. People do. She capped her pen. Then here's your last rule. If you want this to work, you act before they understand what you're doing. That means no moral speeches, no warnings, no stage confrontations. She paused. When families smell process, they weaponize chaos. I won't give them time, I said. Good, she replied. Because once this is signed and funded, they can scream, but they can't touch it. On my way out, the receptionist handed me a thin folder. Inside were 2 pages, a checklist and a calendar with 3 green marks. Under the first mark, deed audit. Under the second, bank custodial updates. Under the third, funding completed. 3 quiet marks. 3 weeks. And after that, a machine with no leaks. The house had always smelled of varnish and lemon oil, like someone was trying too hard to preserve a memory. When I walked through the gate that morning, the air carried the same artificial sweetness, polished nostalgia layered over rot. My mother opened the door with her practiced warmth. Ethan, finally, you look so thin. Are you eating? She hugged me before I could answer, the kind of hug that lasted half a second too long, like a restraint disguised as affection. Behind her, my father's voice came from the living room. Come in, son. Let's talk like adults. That line made me smile. Like adults. As if it had ever been a conversation between equals. He sat on the couch, papers spread across the coffee table, property tax bills, loan documents, a printout from some government site. He was already in negotiation mode, body angled forward, voice calm but rehearsed. My sister lounged nearby, scrolling her phone with a smirk that said she knew more than she actually did. We're glad you came, my father started. Your mother's been worried. You've been distant. I've been busy, I said, placing my briefcase on the floor. Graduation, new projects. Of course, he replied. That's wonderful. And speaking of projects, we wanted to discuss the future of the house. He gestured to the documents like a magician revealing a trick. Property taxes are brutal this year. We're behind. The place is worth a fortune now, but it's bleeding us. We could sell and split the profit. Clean slate for everyone. I looked at him. The same face that had smiled at my graduation photos years ago. The same tone he'd used to convince me to take on just one more loan. Every line, every excuse, was recycled material. My mother added, we know you're the executor, honey. We just need your signature to authorize the sale. Simple paperwork. Simple paperwork. The phrase almost made me laugh. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder. Heavy cardstock, embossed seal, legal comm radiating from every page. My father frowned. What's that? Documentation, I said. Corrections, actually. Grandpa's estate has been reorganized. The assets, including this house, are now under the EW 31 trust. I'm the acting trustee. He blinked, processing. My mother tilted her head, like she'd misheard. The what? The trust, I repeated. It's finalized. Filed, notarized, and recorded. Effective 3 days ago. The property's ownership is under my fiduciary control now. That means... My father cut in, voice rising. That means nothing. You can't just move family assets without approval. I met his glare. I can. And I did. Because I'm the legal executor, and the trust's purpose is asset protection against mismanagement and unauthorized withdrawals. He slammed his palm on the table. The papers jumped. Mismanagement? You're calling your own parents thieves. I stayed seated. I'm calling numbers what they are. You withdrew $480,000 over 6 years. Maintenance, consultation, loan repayments, all to companies that don't exist. I have every record. My sister finally looked up from her phone. You can't be serious. Dad did everything for us. Exactly, I said. For you. Not for the estate. Not for Grandpa's intentions. My mother's eyes welled up. You don't understand the sacrifices. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. I also understand how trust law works. You can keep the tears, Mom. They don't rewrite ledgers. The silence that followed was dense. The air felt heavier, the lemon oil stinging my throat. My father's posture changed. He leaned back now, calculating. So this is your revenge? No, I said quietly. It's correction. He laughed without humor. You think a few legal papers make you invincible? We'll contest this. You're too young to play lawyer. You can try, I said, standing. But the system doesn't care about age. It cares about signatures, timestamps, and chain of custody. And I have all three. My mother reached out, voice trembling. Ethan, please. We're family. That's exactly why it has to be done by law, I said. Because family is where accountability dies. She whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. My father stared at the deed copy, jaw tight. So what now? He finally asked. I closed the folder. Now you stop pretending this place is yours. You have until Friday to vacate. The trust will handle the sale, or not. That's my decision. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in my life, he looked small. Not weak, just stripped of narrative. As I turned to leave, I paused at the doorway. One more thing, I said. Every future communication goes through counsel. Don't call me about repairs, taxes, or memories. That's all over. Outside, the sun hit my face, bright, indifferent. I heard the muffled thud of something hitting the table inside. Maybe a fist, maybe a paperweight. I walked to my car, slow and steady. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was executing. And that was the real inheritance Grandpa left me. The ability to act without explanation. Friday came with perfect irony, bright sky, the kind of spring day that made you think everything in life could still be fixed with a barbecue and a family joke. They arrived early, of course. My mother texted at 8:03 a.m. We're bringing breakfast. Hope you're home, Redheart. I didn't reply. By the time I heard the gate creak, the house smelled of fresh coffee. My father was carrying a grocery bag full of pastries. My sister trailed behind, holding her phone horizontally, recording a cheerful family reunion vlog. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were filming their own eviction notice. Surprise! My mother called, setting plates on the counter like it was Sunday brunch. We thought we could spend the morning together, clear the air. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. There's nothing left to clear. My father ignored the tone. He was good at pretending things were fine until paperwork proved otherwise. We've been thinking, he said, taking a seat. We all said things we didn't mean the other day. Let's be rational. I am rational, I said. Which is why I've arranged for the locksmith to arrive at 8:30. That landed like a gunshot. My sister lowered her phone. You're joking. No, I said. The trust requires a full rekey for security purposes once possession is transferred. Standard procedure. My father's voice hardened. You think you can just... I don't think, I interrupted. I confirm. That's the difference between paperwork and pleading. He stood up, fists clenched but calculated. Ethan, listen to yourself. This is your family. We raised you in this house. Correction, I said calmly. Grandpa raised me. You raised debt. My mother's lip trembled. We didn't steal, we borrowed. We just wanted to keep things going. You can't punish us for trying. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied. I'm protecting what's left. The documents don't care about intentions. She reached across the table, desperate now. Honey, please. This isn't you. You're not cold like this. I held her gaze. Maybe you never knew me when I wasn't paying your bills. The silence that followed was suffocating. The air felt thick with denial and sugar, croissants untouched, orange juice sweating on the table. I could see realization crawling over their faces. This wasn't a bluff. At 8:29, the doorbell rang. My father's head snapped toward the sound like a man hearing his own sentence. I opened the door. The locksmith stood there, a man in his 50s, neutral uniform, clipboard in hand. EW 31 Trust Residence? He asked. That's right, I said. Proceed. He stepped inside and unpacked his tools. The metallic clicks filled the hallway like punctuation marks to everything I hadn't said for years. My sister stormed forward. You can't do this. This is insane. I already did, I said. The documents were filed Tuesday. You just didn't read the mail. She shoved her phone in my face. Everyone's going to see what kind of monster you are. Good, I said. Maybe they'll finally see how inheritance theft looks with a smile filter. Her jaw dropped, and she stormed out into the yard, shouting something incoherent. My father sat back down, defeated posture disguised as dignity. He poured himself coffee. You think this makes you powerful? No, I said. It makes me free. He looked up. You're going to regret this. I already regretted trusting you, I replied. This part's just accounting. The locksmith finished the front door and moved to the side entrance. My mother tried again, softer now. We could find a compromise. You can manage the trust, fine, but let us stay. Just until we figure things out. No, I said. Every compromise in this family became a transaction. This one ends clean. Tears slipped down her cheek, and she whispered, You'll end up alone. I almost smiled. That's the only part of this arrangement that feels safe. When the locksmith packed up, I signed his receipt, initials and date. He nodded and left without a word. The sound of the door closing felt final, like the click of a safe. My father stood slowly, collecting his jacket. My mother followed. They didn't say goodbye. My sister came last, eyes full of venom and disbelief. You'll regret this, Ethan, she hissed. You just ruined everything. I met her stare. No, I said. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already ruined. They left the breakfast untouched. Pastries, coffee, orange juice, all slowly losing warmth. I stood alone in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Then I walked to the window. The locksmith's van disappeared down the street. The sky was still bright, birds still singing. Indifferent witnesses to an ending that felt like peace disguised as cruelty. That's when I realized, love without boundaries isn't love. It's possession with better PR. The first call came before sunrise on Monday. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. The ringtone itself sounded like confrontation. I let it ring until it stopped. Then came another call, and another. By the time the fifth attempt hit voicemail, I already knew they'd found their lawyers. When the email arrived an hour later, the subject line was almost theatrical. Notice of intent to contest trust formation. Attached, a PDF full of hollow confidence. Allegations of coercion, mental instability, potential undue influence. My father's lawyer must have drafted it overnight, high on caffeine and arrogance. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Keller with the subject. Predictable. Her reply came 5 minutes later. Don't engage. Don't reply. They're bluffing. We'll respond through protocol. 2 sentences. That was why I paid her premium rates. No philosophy, no panic. Just a plan. By noon, my parents had switched strategies. My sister posted a story online. A slow pan across the house exterior with the caption, When your brother steals your childhood home, broken heart. The video got traction, sympathy, outrage, validation from strangers who knew nothing. The comments section filled with amateur lawyers and armchair therapists. One message stood out. If he really made a trust, that's illegal without consent. I smiled. Ignorance always sounds confident when it's loud enough. That afternoon, Keller called. We filed a preliminary response. Everything's airtight. Their claim doesn't even meet procedural standards. Do we have to go to court? I asked. Maybe a hearing, but don't expect fireworks. Judges don't care about feelings when the documents are clean. The only real threat is noise, public, emotional, manipulative noise. Let them scream, I said. It's oxygen they can't live without. She chuckled. I like your vocabulary. You think in mechanics. Grandpa taught me that. I replied. Leaks, pressure valves. The family system's no different. By Wednesday, the noise had evolved into a campaign. My mother sent long emails full of mixed tones, half guilt, half threat. We didn't raise you to be cruel. You're isolating yourself. You'll regret this when you're older. Then another. We've spoken to a journalist who's interested in our side. Please don't make this public, Ethan. The contradiction was poetic. Don't make this public while they were preparing to do exactly that. I forwarded both to Keller. Her response was short again. All correspondence must go through counsel. Block personal channels. So I did. I blocked their numbers, muted social media, silenced the world. The first few hours felt strange, like sensory deprivation. Then it became clarity. Silence wasn't emptiness. It was the sound of control. Thursday morning, Keller called again. Update. Opposing counsel withdrew. The trust stands unchallenged. Congratulations. That was fast. They saw the audit trail and ran. The electronic signature verification killed their argument. Your timestamps, IP logs, hash references. Most families never think the nerdy kid keeps receipts. I couldn't help but laugh softly. That's the one advantage of being underestimated. Keller's tone softened a fraction. They'll try personal angles next. Emotional leverage. Ignore every bait. If they push too far, we file a harassment notice. Understood. By the way, she added, I've worked with clients like you. People cleaning up generational messes. You're doing it right. Just remember, winning legally isn't the same as healing. I'm not looking for healing, I said. Just closure. She paused. Closure is a kind of healing, Ethan. Not for me. That evening, I sat in the living room, my living room now, with all the lights off. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. On the table lay a pile of unopened envelopes from my parents' attorney, all forwarded to Keller's address. For the first time, I allowed myself to look at an old photo on the wall. Me at 12, standing next to my grandfather, holding a fishing rod twice my height. He was smiling, proud, alive. I remembered something he said that day when I'd tangled the line. When something knots too tight, don't pull harder. Loosen it and start over. That's what I'd done, loosen the knot. The tragedy was that people mistake loosening for cutting. By Friday morning, the silence became absolute. No calls, no emails, no posts. The storm had burned itself out. Keller called one last time that week. You're in the clear. Funds are secure. Property is uncontested. It's over. Is it? I asked. For now, she said. Until they find a new excuse. I'll be ready, I replied. She laughed softly. Of course you will. You're your grandfather's echo. When the call ended, I looked around the empty room. The lemon scent had faded. The house no longer smelled like nostalgia or varnish, just clean air and unfinished space. Outside, a storm was breaking in the distance, thunder rolling low and slow. I opened the window and let the wind in. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was defending something. I was rebuilding it. And maybe that's what power really is. Not control, not dominance. Just the ability to stand still while the storm screams your name and realize it can't touch you anymore. I didn't plan to revisit the will, but it kept finding me. The copy sat on my desk like a quiet accusation. Thick paper, black ink, my grandfather's initials written with his usual engineer's precision. Every line was clean, functional, deliberate. No poetry, no ambiguity. One sentence always caught my eye. The executor shall be my grandson, Ethan Ward, provided he demonstrates emotional independence from the beneficiaries. The first time I'd read it, years ago, it felt like an insult, emotional independence, as if he thought I was weak, naive, easily manipulated. Now I saw it for what it was, a firewall disguised as advice. He hadn't doubted my heart. He doubted my ability to survive theirs. That line replayed in my head every time my phone buzzed with another guilt-laced message from my mother or another half apology from my sister. They didn't realize Grandpa had written my escape code years before they started their performance. The flashbacks came easy now. I could see him sitting in that same chair on the back porch, mug of coffee in one hand, ledger in the other. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. When Grandpa spoke, silence bent around him. He used to say, families are like engines. They run hot if you feed them guilt instead of oil. At the time, I laughed. I thought it was just one of his mechanical metaphors. Now it sounded like prophecy. When I visited his lawyer after the funeral 3 years earlier, everything had been a blur of condolences and signatures. The firm smelled of dust and disinfectant. My father did most of the talking, shaking hands, pretending to understand legal jargon he clearly didn't. I was 22 then, still too polite to interrupt. The lawyer, an older man named Briggs, had looked at me once and said, "Your grandfather was unusually clear-headed for someone his age. He had no illusions about human nature." I didn't understand what he meant until Briggs handed me a sealed envelope labeled personal copy, executor. Inside was a single note, handwritten. Ethan, you'll be tempted to defend them. Don't. Compassion is not the same as protection. Let the papers speak when words fail. At the time, I folded the note and tucked it into a book. I didn't read it again until after Keller called with the final confirmation that the trust was unbreakable. Only then did I realize Grandpa hadn't written that for my 22-year-old self. He'd written it for the version of me that existed now, the man who no longer explained himself. One night that week, I drove to the cemetery. It was nearly midnight. The gate was closed, but the side entrance was never locked. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I walked toward his grave, the air sharp with that mix of wet soil and pine needles. The headstone was simple. Henry Ward, 1938 to 2019, built things that lasted. I placed the signed trust folder at the base of the stone. No flowers, no prayers, just documentation, the language he understood best. I finished the job, I said softly. The assets are sealed. They can't touch them now. Even if they scream, even if they spin stories, it's done. The wind moved through the trees like slow applause. I used to think you were cold, I continued. Now I realize you just stopped pretending feelings fix theft. For a moment, I thought about all the weekends he'd invited me to the workshop, the endless afternoons we'd spent sorting screws by size because organization is character. Back then, it had seemed obsessive. Now I saw the strategy. He'd been teaching me control disguised as order. You knew this would happen, I said. You knew they'd consume everything if someone didn't build a wall. I paused, hand resting on the cool granite. You built the foundation. I just added the locks. The cemetery was silent except for a distant dog barking somewhere beyond the fence. The world didn't care about justice or closure. It cared about paperwork and proof. And those, finally, were on my side. When I got home, I opened the note again and read the last line one more time. If you ever want to protect something valuable, protect it from those who think they deserve it by birth. I folded it neatly, slid it back into the trust folder, and locked the safe. Standing there in the dim hallway light, I realized Grandpa had never left me money. He'd left me a blueprint for boundaries, written not in sentiment, but in signatures. That night, I slept for 6 uninterrupted hours, the longest in years. And in my dream, Grandpa wasn't warning me anymore. He was just sitting beside me, silent, watching the engine run without leaks. They didn't disappear quietly. Silence, for them, was surrender, and surrender was worse than death. So, predictably, they did what desperate people do. They tried to rewrite the story in public. It started with my sister. She posted a long thread on social media titled, "How My Brother Stole Our Family Legacy." The thumbnail was a photo of the house taken at sunset, all golden light and melancholy, a visual plea for sympathy. She wrote about betrayal, gaslighting, legal manipulation. She left out forged signatures, falsified invoices, and untraceable wire transfers. Within hours, the post blew up. Comments flooded in, digital pitchforks from strangers who didn't know a trust from a TikTok trend. How could he do that to his own parents? Money changes people. He must have always been the cold one. And my favorite, trust funds are scams rich people use to hide guilt. It would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. Keller called the next morning, already aware. I assume you've seen it. I have, I said. Should we respond? No, she replied. Never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty, but only one of you enjoys it. That line made me laugh. I like that about her, the efficiency of her cynicism. Let them perform, she continued. Every lie they tell narrows their legal margin. Public emotion doesn't change signed documents. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Let them talk, I said. Noise is all they have left. By Thursday, the noise reached local gossip blogs. One article ran with the headline, "Family Torn Apart by Greedy Heir." They used my graduation photo, the one where I was smiling stiffly at the camera, diploma in hand. They didn't ask permission, of course. The story quoted close family sources, which probably meant my mother. She'd always been good at emotional framing. The article painted her as a saint who only wanted harmony, and me as the estranged son seduced by power. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Keller sent me a short text. Watch the dominoes fall. Trusts are public record. They've just invited scrutiny. She was right. 2 days later, a local journalist, an actual one, reached out privately. He'd checked property filings and noticed inconsistencies between the family's claims and the recorded transfers. He asked for comment. I told him politely that all inquiries should go through my counsel. He did his job. Within 24 hours, he published a follow-up. Inheritance drama. Legal documents tell a different story. It wasn't sympathetic. It wasn't cruel. It was factual, and facts are poison to manipulators. The comments shifted almost overnight. So the trust was legit? Wait, the parents took money before? This family's messy as hell. By the end of the week, my sister had deleted her thread. My mother locked her account. My father went silent entirely. The same strangers who had once cursed my name moved on to the next outrage cycle, forgetting me like a bad headline. That's how digital storms die, not with justice, but with boredom. Still, The real consequence wasn't public embarrassment. It was what came next. The tax authorities sent a letter to the family residence, now officially under my trust's management, demanding clarification for years of inconsistent deductions. Apparently, the maintenance expenses they'd fabricated were still logged in government databases. Keller handled it quietly, forwarding everything to the investigator who'd been waiting for a reason to open that file. It wasn't revenge. It was just gravity doing its job. A month later, I heard from an old neighbor that my parents had moved into a rented apartment on the other side of town. Smaller, noisier, closer to the kind of reality they'd ignored for decades. My sister, apparently, was still trying to grow an audience online, now posting inspirational quotes about letting go of toxic people. I didn't laugh. There was nothing funny about it. Just symmetry. On the 1-month mark after the public storm, I stood in front of the house, my house, watching movers load the last of the outdated furniture into a truck. The air smelled like fresh paint and freedom. The lead mover asked, "You selling or staying?" "Neither," I said. "I'm reclaiming." He nodded like he understood, though I doubt he did. When they drove off, I walked back inside. The rooms echoed differently now, not hollow, but cleared. The ghosts had left. I sat down at the dining table, opened my laptop, and drafted a final email to Keller. No further action required. All entities stable. Thank you for making silence possible. She replied a few minutes later. Silence is underrated. Spend it wisely. I closed the laptop and looked around. The house was finally quiet enough to hear my own heartbeat. Not the sound of guilt, not the echo of arguments, just calm, structured air. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defending peace. I owned it. Peace, when it finally arrived, didn't sound like music. It sounded like absence. No calls, no messages, no one walking through the gate without permission. The silence was so pure it felt engineered, like a vacuum sealing the end of something toxic. The house, stripped of its chaos, looked larger now. Every echo felt deliberate, like the building was exhaling after years of holding its breath. I didn't realize how much space guilt had occupied until it was gone. The first morning alone, I made coffee and drank it in the kitchen. No interruptions, no arguments about money, no questions about family obligations. The sunlight through the blinds made clean rectangles on the floor. Simple geometry, honest lines. I hadn't felt calm like that since childhood, back when Grandpa used to sit at this same table repairing his watch collection. He'd work quietly, humming some old Sinatra tune while gears clicked under his fingers. I remember asking him once why he liked fixing watches so much. He'd said, "Because when I fix time, it stops owning me." Back then I didn't understand. Now I did. That's what the last few months had been about, fixing time, freezing it at the point where I still had control. In the days that followed, I moved through the house like a caretaker rather than an heir. I cleared closets, boxed old photographs, shredded useless papers, everything that smelled of dependency. There were receipts for things that had never existed, invoices for repairs that had never been done. I burned them in the fireplace one by one. The flames reflected off the glass cabinets, painting the walls in orange. Watching the lies turn to ash felt cleaner than therapy. I replaced furniture, repainted the study, took down the heavy curtains my mother loved. The air changed. The space finally belonged to the present tense. At night, I worked in the quiet, organizing files, reviewing trust reports, adjusting schedules. Not because I needed to, but because order had become my language. Every line of data felt like a heartbeat, steady, rational, alive. People think solitude drives you insane. It doesn't. It purifies you. A week later, I received a letter from the estate management office confirming final clearance. All disputes resolved. No pending claims. Officially, the past had no legal address left. I read the letter twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in the safe next to Grandpa's note. The two documents belonged together, one emotional, one mechanical. Between them, my life finally made sense. That night, I sat in the garden, something I hadn't done in years. The air was crisp, the moon reflecting off the clean patio tiles. The same tiles that, a year earlier, had been stained with oil from my father's broken car. I could still remember him yelling that he'd get around to fixing it. He never did. It was poetic in a way. They broke everything they touched and called it love. I stayed outside for hours, letting my thoughts stretch out. There was no anger left, no satisfaction either, just stillness. The kind of stillness you get when the engine finally stops shaking. A few neighbors started dropping by again. Not to gossip, surprisingly, but to say things like, "The place looks beautiful now," or "It feels peaceful here lately." They had no idea what it took to achieve that peace. One old neighbor, Mrs. Doyle, stopped me by the gate. "You did what had to be done, didn't you?" she said quietly. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I did what was right," I said finally. She nodded. Sometimes that's the same thing. It was strange how validation from strangers felt more genuine than anything my family had ever said. On Sunday morning, I took the last step of the cleansing ritual. I removed the old family portrait from the hallway, the one where we all pretended to smile, the year before Grandpa died. I didn't burn it. I didn't destroy it. I just wrapped it in brown paper and stored it in the attic. Some ghosts don't need exorcising. They just need proper filing. Standing in the now bare hallway, I caught my reflection in the glass cabinet. Older, harder, but calm. There was no triumph, no bitterness, just quiet clarity. I thought about calling Keller to thank her again, but decided against it. She didn't need gratitude. Professionals like her measure success in silence. Instead, I opened the windows wide and let the morning in. The smell of cut grass, the hum of distant traffic, the rustle of leaves. Normal sounds, finally audible again. I realized then that freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just stops asking for permission. That night, I turned off my phone before going to bed. No parting messages, no new accusations, no echoes of the past. For the first time, I slept without waiting for anything to explode. And in that silence, I finally understood what Grandpa had really meant by building things that last. He hadn't been talking about houses or money. He'd been talking about peace, the kind that doesn't need anyone's approval to exist. A month later, life had settled into something dangerously close to normal. I woke early, brewed coffee, read through trust reports as if they were morning news. My routines had structure again, small, precise, self-contained. No drama, no unexpected calls, no emotional detonations waiting to go off. Sometimes I wondered if peace could become addictive. It didn't demand attention, it rewarded discipline. Each quiet morning felt like proof that control wasn't cruelty. It was survival with better manners. Keller called one afternoon, just as I was reviewing new insurance policies. "Congratulations," she said. "We got final acknowledgement from the registrar. Everything is under your full authority now. Even in the event of contest, nothing moves without your approval." "Then it's really done," I said. "As done as these things get." She paused. "What will you do now?" I looked around the room. Bare shelves, open windows, a desk with no clutter. "Live," I said. "But slowly." She laughed softly. "Most people say they'll celebrate. I don't need fireworks," I said. "Just quiet that stays quiet." "Then you're already richer than most of my clients," she replied. Before hanging up, she added, "If you ever build something new, a company, a foundation, whatever, do it under the same principles. Precision first, emotions later." I smiled. That's the only language I speak now. The following week, I visited the bank, not out of necessity, but out of closure. The same receptionist was still there, the one who'd smiled too much the first time I'd asked about my grandfather's account. She looked startled when I greeted her by name. "Mr. Ward," she said. "It's been a while. Everything all right?" "Perfectly," I said. "I just came to sign the final verification. EW 31 Trust." Her eyes flicked to the monitor. "Oh, right. That's you now." "That's me," I said. "It always was. Just took a while for the paperwork to catch up." She handed me the forms with quiet deference. The pen felt lighter than it should have. When I signed the last page, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The system had done what anger never could. It had balanced the equation. Later that day, I drove to the outskirts of town, to the small piece of land Grandpa had owned but never developed. It was just a stretch of overgrown field and a rusted gate. The city hadn't expanded this far yet, so the silence there was different, older, wilder. I parked the car and walked through the tall grass, the wind brushing against my sleeves like static. I remembered him showing me the property when I was a kid. "One day this will be worth something," he'd said. Maybe not in money, but in meaning. Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. Now I did. Value isn't always transaction. Sometimes it's just the right to stand somewhere and know no one can take it from you. I stood there a long time, watching clouds roll across the pale sky. For the first time in months, I felt no weight on my chest. No legal pressure, no emotional residue. Just a kind of clean emptiness that felt earned. When I finally turned to leave, I whispered, "You were right, old man." The wind shifted, soft and approving. That evening, I came home and opened Grandpa's ledger one last time. The final page was still blank. I'd always left it empty out of respect, thinking it was meant to stay that way. But now it felt like an invitation. I picked up a pen and wrote in the same small, precise handwriting he'd taught me. Control is not cruelty. It's clarity. Protection is not selfishness. It's stewardship. Then, under it, I added one final line. Peace is an asset too. Treat it like one. I closed the book, exhaled, and realized something important. There was no satisfaction in winning, only in stabilizing. That was the lesson he'd tried to pass down. Victory fades, order endures. When people online ask me for advice now, I don't tell them to cut off toxic family or stand your ground. Those phrases sound heroic but empty. I tell them something else. Document everything. Speak less. Move first. It's not romantic advice, but it works. Because love is loud, revenge is louder, but proof is silent. And silence, once earned, never owes you an apology. That night, I turned off the lights and sat by the window, watching the city shimmer in the distance. Somewhere out there, my family still existed, probably still blaming me, maybe even convincing themselves they were the victims. It didn't matter. For the first time, their story and mine no longer intersected. The trust, the house, the records, they were just structures. What I'd really built was distance. And distance, I realized, isn't loneliness. It's safety measured in miles and documents. As I finished my coffee, I whispered the same words Grandpa had said years ago while fixing his watch. Run smooth now. And it did.